Hello everyone, hope you are enjoying watching these videos. So in this video we will be seeing about something called transmission modes. So any idea what are these transmission modes? That is the way how the data is transmitted. So in this transmission modes you will be seeing two types of modes. One is serial, another is parallel. So serial transmission mode is nothing but one by one. If you have a big packet having 10 bits or 8 bits in that, one bit will be transmitted, whereas if you use parallel bit, simultaneously all the bits will be transmitted. Again you will see what is synchronous mode, asynchronous mode, isochronous mode. So let's begin. So what is this transmission mode? That is when we are transmitting data with wire that is using wires from one device to another. We will be deciding, that is, do we need to send one bit at a time or a group of bits. If you send one bit at a time, then that is called as serial transmission. Otherwise, if you are sending simultaneous group of bits, that is called as parallel transmission. So the transmission of binary data across a link can be accomplished via two modes. So transmission mode can be of two types, one is parallel, another is serial. One bit at a time you will send, that is called serial. Simultaneously n bits you will send, that is called parallel. So in parallel mode, multiple bits are sent with each clock tick. So at one clock tick, multiple bits are sent. Whereas in serial mode, one bit is sent for a clock tick. So while there is only one way to send parallel data, there are only one way is there to send the parallel data, whereas three ways are there to send the serial transmission. That is, serial transmission is again divided into synchronous, and isochronous transmission. So let's see one diagram, it will be more clear. So your data transmission modes are basically this divided into two types. One is parallel, that is, you will send a group of bits simultaneously, whereas here one bit at a time, that is serial. Again your serial transmission mode is divided into three parts, that is asynchronous, synchronous and isochronous. So let's see each of them in detail. So let's start with something called parallel transmission. As I told, in parallel transmission we can send a group of bits at one time. So for sending group of bits at one time, we have n lines. Instead of a single transmission medium, we have multiple lines. As you can see in this diagram, we are sending 8 bits together. So how many lines are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So instead of having one line, we have 8 lines, and at a time you can send 8 bits together. So sender can send 8 bits together. So by grouping we can send data n bits at a time of 1. This is called parallel transmission, and the mechanism of parallel transmission is a simple one, that is, you have to use, instead of one wire, n wires. So if you want to send 8 bits at a time, you have to use how many wires? 8 wires. You have to use 8 wires. If you want to send 10 bits at a time, you have to use 10 wires. So that way each bit has its own wire, and all n bits of a group are transmitted in one clock tick from one device to another. So can you tell me some advantage of this parallel transmission? What are the advantage of this and what are the disadvantage? So as you can see, multiple bits are getting transmitted at a time. So it might be having some advantage. Yes. So what is the advantage? That is, advantage is speed increases. As you are sending n bits at a time, your speed of transfer will increase compared to serial transmission, whereas in serial transmission you have one line, one bit at a time it is transmitted. So that is the advantage of parallel transmission, that is, it speeds up the data transfer. Then what is the disadvantage? Since for transmission we need multiple lines, so what will happen if you need multiple lines? More infrastructure, more hardware you require and all, and more maintenance also required. So cost will increase in parallel transmission, that is, cost of parallel transmission requires n communication line just to transmit the data stream. And also because this is very expensive also, So only parallel transmission we use only for shorter distance. Longer distance, as the distance increase, lot of hardware will be required, because many wires, and still not only cost we have to maintain. If one of the wire cut, we don't understand which wire has the problem. So it is very expensive. So next, now let us see one more transmission mode, that is serial transmission. So in serial transmission, as I said you at the beginning, you will have only one bit to send at a time rather than n. So how many wires you will be having in that? Yes. So one bit is transmitting at a time, so one wire you will be having. So as you can see in the diagram, you have sender and you have receiver. So sender wants to send this data 011000010, and how he has to send? One bit at a time. First he will send 0, then 1, and so on. So 8 bits are sent one after the other. Okay. So we need only one wire. But can you see here something called parallel to serial converter? Because by default in data communication, when signals are traveling in the wire, the transmission has to be parallel. But so when you use serial transmission, you have to use something called converter, which, because it has to convert from parallel to serial and serial to parallel, because by default you have to send it in the parallel. So let's see some of the advantage of serial transmission. That is, advantages, it reduces the cost as we use only one line instead of n line. And the disadvantage is your communication. What will happen is when by default the communication is in parallel. So when you use serial transmission mode, you have to convert. That is, you have to convert from sender and line between parallel to serial, and between line and receiver serial to parallel. And this again, this serial transmission is divided into 3 types, that is asynchronous. So let's see this. What is this asynchronous transmission? In asynchronous transmission, timing of the signal is not important. So it uses extra bit to indicate which is the start bit, which is the end bit. So for example, if it is a 8-bit data, you can take start bit as 0, end bit as 1, so that it tells the receiver that where the bit starts, where your bit ends. So that's how you predict the group that arrives at the receiver. So that's what is given to alert the receiver to the arrival of a new group. Therefore, an extra bit is added to the beginning of each bit. This bit is usually known as 0, called start bit. To let the receiver know the byte is finished, one or more additional bit are appended to the end of the byte. This is known as stop bit. By this method, each byte is increased. That is, if 8 bits are given for the actual data, 2 bits is for extra information. So 10 bit will be given. In addition, the transmission of each bit may be followed by a gap of varying duration. This gap is called idle. That is, instead of having extra byte after each group of data, you can have gaps, so to indicate that one transmission has ended. So here is some example. So as you can see, there are some gaps between the each data, and 0 indicates start of the data, 1 indicates stop of the data, and so that you will not get confused why 0, why 1, because data also is 0, 1, there is gap between the data. So that is synchronous transmission. Whereas in synchronous transmission, data is transmitted without start and stop bit. Okay, so it is like continuous, data is continuous, but how you will understand where the data has started and ended, that is, it is the job of the receiver to group the bit. So that is the 2 types of serial transmission, that is synchronous and asynchronous. In synchronous, you need not have start bit and stop bit, whereas in asynchronous you have, and isochronous is not for your syllabus. So this is about the transmission mode. So some of the important questions here is, explain different transmission mode. You have to draw the diagram and explain all those. And one more is, differentiate between synchronous and asynchronous mode. So again, I have referred the same book, that is Data Communication and Networking by Forozon, 5th edition. Hope you have understood today's video on data transmission mode. So you go through the content, also take the quiz given in the description box. Any question you can comment in the comment box. So see you soon. Until then,